Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're going to do a deep dive into Sony's 2024 annual report. And, I know annual reports maybe aren't the most exciting thing in the world, but stick with us because this one is pretty interesting.
Oh, yeah, there's some seriously interesting stuff in here. We're going to go beyond just the numbers and kind of peel back the layers of this massive global company. We're going to look at everything from their huge business segments to their plans for the future. We might even find some insights that even the most hardcore Sony fans might have missed.
Okay, so let's kind of map out the Sony empire.
hmm
The report breaks down their operations into 7 major business segments. We've got all the big ones that everybody knows, game and network services with PlayStation, music, pictures, but Sony's reach goes way beyond just those.
Right. They're also huge in entertainment, technology, and services. That's everything from their Bravia TVs to their cameras and smartphones. And then there's also imaging and sensing solutions. That's where those tiny but incredibly powerful image sensors come from, the same ones that make your smartphone camera so good.
Wait, hold on. You're saying those really sophisticated camera sensors are a Sony product? I had no idea. I always figured they were made by like some random tech company that I'd never heard of.
Yeah, that's Sony. They're kind of quietly powering some of the most innovative tech out there. But even that's not all. They're also in financial services. They offer insurance and banking, mostly in Japan. And then there's the category of all other that covers things like making discs and recording media.
Wow. They really weren't kidding about having a diverse portfolio. It's like they've got a hand in everything.
Yeah, and it's all part of a plan. Sony is all about creating what they call condo. That means they're trying to create emotionally moving experiences that go beyond just the product itself. That philosophy drives everything they do, from designing game consoles to making blockbuster movies.
I'm starting to see how that condo idea ties everything together. It's all about making a connection with the audience, whether it's an amazing gaming experience, a scene in a movie, or even just a photo someone takes with a Sony camera.
Exactly, but creating condo on a global level comes with its own set of challenges. Sony has some serious competition in basically every sector they operate in.
Yeah, I can imagine. In electronics, they're up against like Samsung and Apple. And in entertainment, it's all about grabbing people's attention in a world that's already flooded with streaming services and big movie franchises.
Yeah, and it's not even just about beating the competition. They also have to deal with the complexities of operating in a globalized world. Think about all the different laws and regulations, fluctuating exchange rates, even geopolitical risks. It's a lot.
Oh, for sure. It's hard enough to just keep up with consumer trends and new technology, but then on top of that, they've got to deal with operating in all these different countries with different rules. That's a
Yeah.
whole other level of difficulty.
It's like walking a tightrope. But Sony seems to be handling it pretty well with a mix of strategic acquisitions, new product development, and a focus on sustainability.
Okay, so we've got a pretty good idea of the scale of Sony's operations and the whole condo thing that drives them. But now I'm curious to see how that translates into their actual financials. Let's open up those numbers and see what they tell us about this global giant.
All right, let's dive right into those financials then. Sony's revenue for the fiscal year 2024 was a mind-blowing 11,260,037 million yen. I mean, that's basically the GDP of a small country.
Yeah, that's a number that's hard to even comprehend. But just looking at revenue doesn't tell the whole story. What were the big things that drove such a huge performance?
Well, if we break it down by their different business segments, the music segment was a real star. Sales were up a huge 17% compared to the year before. That really shows how strong their digital music strategy is and how good they are at finding and supporting new talent through programs like their Artist Forward program.
So they're not just coasting on their back catalog. They're actually out there trying to shape the future of the music industry by supporting the next generation of musicians. It's pretty impressive.
Oh yeah, for sure. It shows they're thinking long term, not just about quick profits. Now, the pictures segment also saw some growth. It was up about 9%. But that segment is always going to be affected by how well movies do at the box office, which can be unpredictable.
Yeah, one big hit can make all the difference. But it sounds like Sony's strategy of developing strong intellectual property, things like franchises with global appeal like Spider-Man, is working out for them.
Exactly. They're creating these whole cinematic universes that go way beyond just the movies themselves. They're branching out into streaming merchandise, even theme park attractions. But maybe the most interesting story is in the imaging and sensing solutions segment. Remember those little camera sensors we talked about?
Yeah, there's tiny powerhouses that are changing technology as we know it.
Well, that segment is a real growth engine for Sony. Even though they had some production issues in 2024, probably because of supply chain problems, they're predicting a lot of growth in the next few years. And it's not just about smartphones anymore. They're getting into automotive applications, providing the eyes for those self-driving cars.
Wow, so while other tech companies are battling it out in the metaverse, Sony's quietly becoming a leader in the real-world technology that's going to power the future of things like transportation. That's pretty smart.
It is. They're using their expertise in a very specific area to carve out a special place for themselves in a market that's changing all the time. And that's not even mentioning their investments in things like medical devices and industrial automation.
It's amazing how they're thinking so far ahead. Okay, so we've talked about revenue. What about profitability, though? Are they managing their expenses well? What does their bottom line look like?
Well, looking at their income statement, it says that while Sony's total sales and financial services revenue grew to 13,020,768 million yen, their cost of sales also went up to 8,089,317 million yen. So basically, as they're making more money, they're also spending more. It's something to keep an eye on.
So it's not just about bringing in more money. It's about making sure they're spending it wisely to keep those profits coming in. What's their net income looking like?
Their net income came in at 824,230 million yen. That's a solid number. It shows they're doing a pretty good job of managing their expenses relative to their revenue. And if we don't count the financial services segment, that number's a little lower, 818,106 million yen.
Okay, so even with those rising costs, they're still making a pretty hefty profit. But what about their overall financial health? What does their balance sheet tell us about their assets, liabilities, and how they're handling their debt?
Their balance sheet shows they're in a really strong financial position. They've got a ton of assets, including 1,649,041 million yen in goodwill.
Goodwill. That's basically the value of their brand reputation and how much extra they paid to acquire different businesses over time, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it really says a lot about the value they've built up through their acquisitions and the recognition their brand has.
And I bet their intangible assets like the intellectual property they have in music, movies, and gaming are huge.
You're right on the money there. Their intangible assets, which include their content, come to a massive 7,423,874 million yen. But it's not all about assets. We got to look at their liabilities, too. Their financial liabilities total 5,718,745 million yen. That includes stuff like long-term borrowing and lease liabilities.
So they do have a good amount of debt. But considering how big they are and all those assets, it seems manageable, right?
I'd say so, yeah. It's not unusual for companies as big as Sony to use debt strategically to help them grow, but to really get a handle on their financial health, we need to check out their cash flow statement.
All right, cash flow. That's the lifeblood of any business. Are they generating enough cash to cover what they need for their operations and investments?
Their cash flow statement tells us that their net cash provided by operating activities was a strong 1,126,957 million yen. That means they're bringing in a good chunk of cash just from their regular business activities.
Yeah, it's a good sign. But they're also putting a lot of money into things that'll help them grow right. Like we talked about their push into new markets like automotive and all those acquisitions.
Exactly. Their net cash used in investing activities was 899,983 million yen. That reflects how committed they are to expanding their reach and what they can do.
So they're pouring resources into innovation and strategic acquisitions, but they're also generating a lot of cash from their regular operations. What does that mean for their free cash flow?
Their free cash flow, the cash they've got left over after covering their operating expenses and capital expenditures, was 226,974 million yen.
That's a pretty healthy free cash flow. It gives them some wiggle room to invest more in growth, pay down debt, or even reward their shareholders. Speaking of which, let's talk about how Sony is creating value for its shareholders. I know they've been buying back their own shares, but what's the thinking behind that?
Well, buying back shares is basically a way to give value back to the shareholders. By reducing the number of shares that are out there, they increase the value of each remaining share. That can boost earnings per share and maybe even drive up the stock price.
So it's kind of like they're saying, we believe in our company so much, we're going to buy back a piece of it ourselves. And that buyback program was a pretty big deal, right?
They bought back about 400 billion yen worth of shares. That sends a clear message that they think their stock is undervalued, and it's a way to reward those investors who are holding on to their shares. But that's not the only way they're rewarding shareholders. Don't forget about dividends.
Right. Those nice little payments that investors get. What's the deal with Sony's dividend policy?
Sony has been really consistent with their dividend payouts in recent years. It shows how committed they are to sharing their profits with their shareholders.
So they're doing share buybacks and paying consistent dividends. They're hitting all the right notes for investors who are looking for a return on their investment. But beyond just the financial returns, what does the future hold for Sony? What's their vision for growth and innovation in the coming years? So we've covered Sony's massive business, their whole condo philosophy, and the really impressive financial performance. But what's next for this huge company? How are they going to navigate the world of technology and entertainment, which is always changing?
Well, the report makes it pretty clear that Sony is all in on growth and innovation. They're making strategic bets on some key areas that they think will shape the future. And they're not afraid to mix things up.
All right, give us the inside scoop. What are these big bets they're making? What trends are they watching closely?
We already talked about image sensors and how they could totally revolutionize everything from smartphones to self-driving cars. That's a core area of focus for Sony. They're investing a ton of money in research and development, trying to push the limits of what those little cameras can do.
It's wild to think that something so tiny could have such a huge impact. It's like they're building the foundation for a future where technology just blends seamlessly into our lives.
Exactly. And they're not just focused on the hardware, they're developing software and algorithms to make those sensors even better. It's opening up all sorts of new possibilities for applications that we probably haven't even imagined yet.
It's like they're creating the nervous system for the future of technology. It's pretty mind-blowing.
It really is. And speaking of mind-blowing stuff, let's talk gaming. That's still a major growth area for Sony, and buying Bungie was a genius move.
Bungie is known for creating those really immersive online worlds with super passionate communities. Games like Destiny and Halo, people spend years of their lives playing those games.
Right, and Sony wants to use that expertise to make their own awesome live service games. Those are the kind of games that bring in money over time and keep players hooked.
So it's about building those online worlds where people feel connected and want to keep coming back for more.
Exactly, and they're not limiting themselves to consoles either. They're looking into cloud gaming, which lets people play their favorite games on any device, anywhere.
That's a real game changer.
Yeah.
It opens up gaming to a whole new group of people who might not have the money or even the desire to buy expensive consoles.
It's a smart strategy. They realize that the future of gaming is about being accessible and flexible. And we can't forget about anime. Sony's been making big moves there too. They bought Crunchyroll, the biggest streaming platform for anime.
Anime has just exploded in popularity all over the world. Sony clearly sees the potential in that market. And they're not just buying up platforms, they're putting money into tools and technology to help the people who create anime.
Yeah, they developed this animation software called Anime Canvas. It makes it easier and faster to create anime and gives those animators some really advanced tools.
So it's like they're building a one-stop shop for anime, from the creation all the way to getting it out to people. They seem really serious about becoming a major force in the anime world.
They definitely are. And it's interesting how they're connecting the dots between their different business segments. They're using their intellectual property across all sorts of different platforms.
Oh yeah, they're turning popular PlayStation games into movies and TV shows through PlayStation Productions. That's a really clever way to introduce those franchises to a bigger audience.
And they're not just sticking to traditional media either. They're even getting into the metaverse with things like the Gundam metaverse. They're making those immersive online experiences for fans.
It's like they're taking their famous characters and stories and bringing them to life in all these new and exciting ways. They're always pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
And they're not afraid to try new things. They've created these super high-tech virtual production studios where they can make some unbelievably realistic visual effects. Imagine the cool scenes from superhero movies, but even more immersive and lifelike.
That's the future of filmmaking right there. They're blurring the lines between reality and fantasy.
And they're using things like artificial intelligence and machine learning to make their creative process even better. Like in the game Marvel's Spider-Man 2, they used AI to automatically sync the subtitles with the dialogue in tons of different languages. That saved them a lot of time and money.
So AI isn't just some far-off idea. They're using it right now to make things more efficient. That's really impressive.
It is. It shows that Sony is committed to innovating and using new technology.
So after taking this deep dive into Sony, what's the big takeaway? What's the story they're trying to tell?
I think the story of Sony is about ambition, being adaptable, and always striving to create those deep emotional experiences that Kondo they're so passionate about. They're not afraid to embrace new technology, explore new things, and connect with people all over the world.
It's inspiring to see a company that's been around for so long, still pushing the limits and finding new ways to do things. It's a reminder that even in a tough, competitive world that's constantly changing, you can always find ways to innovate and grow.
I couldn't have said it better myself. So to wrap it all up, Sony is a company that really has its finger on the pulse of what's next. They're not just going along with all the changes in technology, they're shaping them. And that's what makes them such a fascinating company to follow.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into Sony's 2024 annual report. Hopefully you learned some new things about this really interesting company.
We definitely encourage you to keep learning about Sony. If anything caught your attention, check out their full annual report for a closer look at how they do things. There's always more to discover.
And until next time, keep diving deep. And remember, knowledge is power.